Future trading involves risk and is not suitable for all investors. Content provided in this segment is meant for educational purposes and is not a solicitation to buy or sell commodities.
Hi, it's Steve and Joe for Fresh Agenda, Everrank's Global Insights team. It's Steve. We're back with a quick update, bit of market, bit of trade, and of course, chat of the week.
And we are in Burleigh Heads. So we've relocated from Melbourne. What that also means for those very close watching fans, there's no vinyl cover or little knick-knack from the shelf on the shelf behind us. So sorry about that. We just can't do it here. Let's swing into some of the data and you'll start us off.
Yeah, so looking firstly at this week's Pulse event, whole milk powder down 2.4% on the prior Pulse event this time around. No change from last week's GDT event. Whole milk powder futures are still fairly positive. They moved up strongly in just prior to this auction. Demand pull might be improving, but also we've seen over the GDT that there has been that cut in the offering, particularly in February. And of course, we're in that lower seasonal part of the year for New Zealand.
It's been well managed, isn't it?
It has.
Steady increases week on week. Yeah. So skim milk powder, turning to that, and we've seen the futures, some short-term strength in skim futures on the SGX. It was a strong GDT outcome last week, which, that settled into the results and still moving, on last week. Pulse overnight had a bit of a shock, brought things back to earth. The result was down $160 or 5% on the auction result last week and down just $5 on the previous Pulse. So, are we seeing some sort of correction? I mean, there is a different cohort that turn up at Pulse events for that online auction, but this is a fairly standout drop. We haven't had many drops. You can see back through that chart and longer, in fact, that since we've seen such a dip.
Yeah, and looking at the EX futures for skim milk powder, there does seem to be a bit of a firming in those futures, perhaps reflective of that discount that we're seeing from the last GDT or so. Skim milk concentrate prices are improving despite, a bit of a loosening in the availability of milk in Europe at the moment. They had just edged a little bit higher, Steve. So interesting to watch that.
And this is where that convergence you're hinting at there, Joe, see that European price moving in forward prices and a bit of sideways now for the NZX futures, which are, maybe hinting we've topped out. You could see that divergence very clearly in like-for-like GDT results, just comparing the Fonterra against Arla and Solaric, the two European sellers, but just recently that's really fanned out. I mean, we have had some big differences before back in 23, but this is really fanned out. And is it sustainable? Maybe not. Yeah. This is something taken from our dairy trade simulator. And what we're looking at here is monthly trade into a selected 6 countries, the ASEAN 6. They're the monthly skim exports into those markets from the top 12 exporters, running that against the weighted cost index. Now, this is in the currencies of the destination markets. And you see it's a combination of rising skim prices, but also a stronger dollar pushing that up right now. So skim prices have quickly gone very high past the peak we reached in 22 into these countries. Now, that's quite some number because that was pretty heady at the time. You could see the hollowing out that occurred after that when we reached that height. We had a reasonable bounce along as prices were going up. This is through 18 through 22. We did clear a lot of stock there. But, are we getting into a difficult period for the affordability of those markets?
Yeah, it does start to get pretty tough for those markets, Steve. But the interesting thing, I think, is will we see a big fall in GDT pricing as a result? We know that for February, offer volumes are well down, and they'll be well down in March as well compared to the same period in the prior year. So it'll be interesting to see if that, that tougher pricing situation gets reflected in GDT prices.
I think it's also interesting about now, we're at about the same time of the season when we saw that price sustain quite high levels in 22, whether we see that or not. There are very different circumstances now without China buying heavily. Joe, take us to butter.
Yeah, so butter futures on the EEX continue to weaken, and we've seen in spot prices milk easing a little bit, a bit more cream in European markets. So we are seeing those spot prices weaken. So you would expect to see a similar response in the futures curves, which is what we're getting, Steve. Mm.
And all that cream.
Yes, all that cream in the US. CME cash settled butter futures are well down. And really, we would expect that. Just we're consistently told that there's plenty of cream hitting churns and more product coming to the CME. So, that's pretty much in line with what we'd expect.
And then we line up the global butter comparison, and we see a different type of convergence where those forward prices for New Zealand on futures are quite different to what GDT is reflecting. Maybe more of the recognition of the wider market where softer trade may be coming. Anyway, let's go to Europe and look at milk production.
Yeah, I mean this is really the thing that we're all watching in terms of drivers for the first half of 2025. France and Germany are still down more than 2% in the weekly data that we're seeing out of Europe. So still a bit of a struggle there. Poland and Ireland are certainly stronger year on year. We're seeing increased production there. We'll look in a little bit more detail at Ireland shortly, Steve.
It's a bit of a spoiler for Chat of the Week, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but the other important update that we've seen in the data is from China. And this is from the monthly update that we get out of China, showing us what the trends are in terms of milk production and fluid milk processing. So those dark bars are the demand for fluid milk. So that's, milk going into mostly UHT packaging. And that's a really important up bar there because we're still seeing milk production well down. Milk prices are still soft, so that suggests that we're not at the bottom yet. But in December, with that increase in fluid milk processing demand combined with that reduction in overall milk production, we estimate that manufacturing milk availability was down about 43% for the month. And so we have seen a really sharp decline out of the Chinese data in terms of both whole milk powder production, but also consumption, Steve. So, we really don't know where the bottom is in China at the moment in terms of both their production and also where they're going to settle in terms of import demand, I don't think.
But if you're on a road, this is like a really slow, long corner turning gradually.
Yeah.
Well, there.
Are we there?
Some global trade updates.
Yeah, and we're seeing some fairly familiar trends in US exports, Steve, up again in milk solids equivalent terms for December. Really strong cheese growth, up 21% in the month of December and 18% up for the year. Mostly it's about Mexico. Exports to Mexico were up 28% for the month and 30% for the year. So that continues to be a really strong market for the US. Perhaps, again, a little bit of front loading of demand in the last months of 2024, just ahead of the Trump administration, with the tariffs that were threatened, but also increased sales into Central America and Australia as part of that mix. On the other hand, Steve, we've got the lowest skim milk powder tonnage since mid-2019. Southeast Asia is leaving the biggest hole in trade, and that's being filled out of New Zealand and Australia even at the end of 2024. Another interesting little tidbit was, the percentage changes looks enormous. It's still really small volumes, but we just saw how much cheaper US butter is than every other major region in the world. We did see a bit of an uplift in butter exports in December as well. So
it's mostly the wrong type.
Yeah, that's right. But anyway, it's there in the data.
Okay, bringing us home with Chart of the Week.
Yeah, Chart of the Week, the one you've been waiting for, Steve. Ireland daily milk production per month. And we just thought we'd put these, lots of people are reacting to the 30% increase in December for Irish milk production, but we really thought it would be worthwhile putting it in perspective. That, of course, is up year on year on a very weak comparative. And you can just see that green line there, Steve, for 2023, how much lower the end of year in 2023 was for Irish milk production than what we've seen in the previous 2 years. December was actually still below 5.5% below 2022, Steve. So, it is a big improvement year on year, but it's certainly not out of the ordinary in terms of Irish milk production. It's taken the total to within 0.5% of 2023 output, but 2024 was 4.6% below 2022. So, it's still a low production year in Ireland. And some interesting insights into what that means in terms of product mix, Steve, that you're going to bring us.
Yeah, so product mix is generally shifting towards cheese with new capacity installed, but that doesn't mean the numbers are swinging wildly. In the 3 months to November, though, milk was up year on year 12.5% on that week 23. Cheese output lifted 14%, but over the full year, and you gave away that milk number in the previous one, over the full year, which was up 0.5%, or down 0.5%, I'm sorry, but cheese output was flat over the full year.
Yeah.
And really keeping cheese flat, I think the new capacity came on year before that. We still saw, in 23, we saw a 5% drop in milk, but no fall in cheese output.
Yeah.
The other thing going on here is the type of cheese. And so with cheese rising 14% in that period, skim milk powdered down hugely, right, as it's taken away from cheese. But you see butter up because of the generous cream that comes from a mozzarella production facility, which is taking more of the cheese mix. So that's an interesting dimension on, and maybe adding to the complexity of the European butter market is that extra butter coming along recently.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's it from us. We'll be here at the beach for the next week, and we'll be back again at the same time.